AP 120, Chapter 13, Topics, Blood Flow Through the Heart. All right, so blood obviously must flow through the heart to get into either the pulmonary circuit, heading toward the lungs, or the systemic circuit, heading to the various tissues of the entire body. So it all starts with deoxygenated blood arriving on the right side from the superior vena cava, the inferior vena cava, and the coronary sinus. So these three veins carry blood into the right atrium. And this is, of course, deoxygenated blood. Then the blood passes through the tricuspid valve and enters the right ventricle. And then when the ventricle contracts, the blood travels past the pulmonary valve into the pulmonary trunk. The blood then splits, going into the left and right pulmonary arteries, and then travels to the lungs, where it gets rid of carbon dioxide and picks up oxygen. And this is, of course, the pulmonary circuit. Then the blood returns to the heart and enters the left atrium. So again, the left and right pulmonary veins carry oxygenated blood into the left atrium. The blood then passes through the mitral valve or bicuspid valve and enters the left ventricle. And then from there, it passes through the aortic valve and into the aorta, and then carries the oxygenated blood throughout the body. And this is, of course, the systemic circuit, going through all the tissues of the body. And since this is a circuit, blood will then once again become deoxygenated and arrive back into the right atrium via the superior vena cava, the inferior vena cava, and the coronary sinus. So this is a constant pumping, a constant moving of blood through the pulmonary and systemic circuits. It's worth mentioning that the right and left sides of the heart actually act at the same time. So the same time that blood's going from the right atrium into the right ventricle, blood is also going from the left atrium into the left ventricle. And then when blood goes from the right ventricle into the pulmonary trunk, at the same time, blood is going from the left ventricle into the aorta. So these two sides of the heart, the two pumps of the heart, operate together. All right, one thing you notice when you get a transverse section of the ventricles of the heart, that the left ventricle, its walls are much, much thicker. You have a lot more cardiac muscle tissue within the walls of the left ventricle than you see within the walls of the right ventricle. So why is this the case? Well, I hope you immediately thought that it was because the left ventricle has to send blood throughout the entire body, while the right ventricle only has to send blood to the lungs, which are conveniently located right next to the heart. So you need a lot more force, a lot more pressure to send blood throughout the entire body than you do to send blood to the lungs from the heart. All right, the heart also has a sort of skeleton. So what we're seeing here and here is if you're looking down at the heart, and the atria have been removed. So the atria that are on top, that are superior, have been removed. So we're looking at the top of the ventricles. And we can actually see the four valves of the heart, the tricuspid, bicuspid, aortic and pulmonary, pulmonary, aortic, bicuspid, and tricuspid. And what you see is there is a lot of dense connective tissue surrounding the valves. And this is the fibrous skeleton of the heart, is this dense connective tissue surrounding the valves. They act as an attachment point for the valves of the heart. They also act as an attachment point for the cardiac muscle fibers. And another important function is they prevent the valves from overstretching, which is very important. We do not want the valves of the heart to become damaged, to become overstretched, and unable to close properly. All right, so blood flow through the heart again. So as I go through it, see if you can remember the steps. So here is the deoxygenated blood arriving in the right atrium. Blood passes through and then enters hopefully you said, blood passes through the tricuspid valve and enters the right ventricle. Then blood goes from the right ventricle past and into hopefully you said, it passes through the pulmonary valve and enters the pulmonary trunk, which is part of the pulmonary circulation, carrying deoxygenated blood to the lungs. And then oxygenated blood arrives through the pulmonary veins into the left atrium. And then this oxygenated blood passes through and enters hopefully you came up with bicuspid valve or mitral valve and left ventricle. And then blood passes through to enter hopefully you passes through the aortic valve to enter the aorta and the systemic circulation to carry oxygenated blood throughout the tissues of the body. And of course, this goes on and around and around. So we also have blood being carried to the heart itself. Heart is, after all, a living organ, so it needs its own steady supply of blood carrying oxygen and nutrients and carrying away carbon dioxide and wastes. And this is referred to as the coronary circuit. So the coronary circuit is the blood vessels carrying heart blood to the heart itself. So it all starts almost as soon as the aorta is formed. There are two small arteries that detach off of it, carrying blood to the heart. We have the right coronary artery for the right side of the heart and the left coronary artery for the left side of the heart. So again, they come off the aorta and carry the oxygenated, nutrient-rich blood to the heart. So turns out that blood flows best through the coronary arteries when the heart is relaxed. Apparently, when the heart is contracting, it actually closes the vessels. The vessels get squished, as it were, and do not have the space for blood. So only when the heart is relaxed is blood flowing to and from it. All right, the right and left coronary arteries branch many times into other arteries, such as the anterior interventricular artery, the posterior interventricular artery, and so on. They branch, get smaller and smaller, and finally branch into these networks of blood vessels called anastomoses. Anastomoses are just a bunch of interconnected small blood vessels that are able to service the same tissues, so that if one of the small blood vessels gets blocked, blood can still bypass that blockage and get to the important tissues of in this case, the heart. Again, these are the small arteries. The anastomoses do not include the larger arteries of the coronary circuit. And then, of course, after the arteries branch into tiny capillaries, gases and nutrients are exchanged, wastes are brought into the veins, and then the veins carry the blood out and away from the heart. Some of the veins' names, which you don't have to remember, include great cardiac vein, small cardiac vein, anterior cardiac vein, and middle cardiac vein. So they're carrying blood away from the heart. And then they empty into the coronary sinus. So you do need to remember the coronary sinus is the vein that carries the blood from the coronary circuit and empties into the right atrium. So the various cardiac veins empty their blood into the coronary sinus, which then empties into the right atrium. Coronary circulation disorders, well, a big one is myocardial infarction. Myocardial infarction, more commonly known as a heart attack, occurs when you have complete blockage in one of the larger coronary arteries. So again, blood flow cannot go through those larger coronary arteries because it is completely blocked. And this will always lead to the death of some cardiac muscle tissue. So when someone has a heart attack, their heart is permanently damaged because of the heart attack, and their heart muscle will lose strength. Often, when someone has a heart attack, they also experience angina pectoris. Angina pectoris is, well, chest pain. So often you experience severe chest pain, often also a shooting pain down the left arm that is associated with the heart attack. Although it turns out there are other forms of pain that can be associated with a heart attack. It turns out a significant number of women, when they have heart attacks, actually experience the pain as more of an abdominal pain. And of course, heart attacks not only weaken the heart, but also can lead to sudden death. And that is it for this part of chapter 13.